$400 around state
Yeah.
institutions.
And then I got one son or grandson who's freshman in college. At Ball State when COVID hit. Of course, that was bad college experience. And so now he has a. Wayne State's a video company, but does commercials and shit. You know. So two. Doing something for IndyCar. Chris. One see the one Chris, really going to in the back row, I've got a little coat disease. The one Chris, I hear. And. Yeah, he's got physics, they're sharp, they were there, then, that's the sign of life. My work, they're sharp. There's, letting photography that travels on weekends, safe, so that there's a kid. And there's nothing wrong with that. Well,
It was just our first try.
No, it was.
Sir,
I didn't
How are you?
know how nice Jay is. This like coaches probably.
Oh, yeah.
I would rather
Even
you
in
can help
the
me right here when the
That's
weather's
right.
like this.
He might be nice, or he just
Looks like
might,
he wasn't nice.
he said he just might rub it deep into the woods. It sounded like
I think the road brick dust did it.
he did it in a silent way, right?
Must have.
So what's that mean? He said on Facebook, Jay, I'm not told you, but he did nothing, so what's that say? Everybody will play, figure it out.
you will get your pretty much.
Yeah, the Winchester game did that.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think that'll be me today.
It's recorded now, it is work.
Mhm.
Okay. I didn't see, there it is, and yeah, there's the all-seeing eye that you're dead. It was looking right at it.
Hey, Dylan, I left the back row for him, I don't see it.
Say what?
I left the back row for him, but I don't see it.
I know, not surprised. But maybe we shouldn't speak too soon, because it'll be different at our meeting.
Well, Curry. Good to see you. Good to see you. You said, my brother, we'll spitball on another.
Then we can start. Let's begin, okay, play.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic, stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And normally we start with old business, but since we have guests,
Yes.
in the, the interest of time and your patience, by all means.
I appreciate that. Well, Chris invited me, and I'm not sure exactly what you want to talk about. I want to talk about a lot of stuff.
I think the main thing.
Oh,
You give me
that.
a platform, and I'm gonna talk about the dreaded 2 mile friend.
Yeah, I think the main thing is just a clarification, and I wish all the council was here tonight to hear this too, because I think the council was really having some questions about it. As far as what Tom's responsibilities are within the 2 mile friend versus within the town limits. And how those differ.
Now, I'm not an attorney, but I played one on television, so you can take what I say for a grain of salt. Also, tonight I have Angela E. Bacher with me. Angela is our recently appointed plan director. She's been with our department for several years and moved her up to that spot. And so some of this is probably going to be good for her to hear as well. If I could start out and talk a little bit about just zoning in general and the 2 Mile Fringe history. So Hagerstown, as far as I can see back, you've had zoning since the 50s. And you did zoning in the 2 Mile peripheral since about that time. Wayne County did not start zoning until the 60s, because, you know, back then in the 50s and early 60s, it was mostly predominantly agriculture. There were no pressures on development, you know, no residential, no businesses that were interested there. Most of the growing was in the communities. So you had zoning in the 2 Mile, and it was actually a circle back then rather than following the road which does now. And that went on into the early 60s. And then when the law changed, it changed to read that if counties then developed a comprehensive plan, they would take back control of the unincorporated area of the county. So you lost it for a short period of time when Wayne County took on enacted their zoning code, and that's about 1967. So the law changed again shortly thereafter, because you can imagine there was an outcry from the community that they wanted to control that fringe area. So the law changed a little bit again, and Hagerstown took back the 2 Mile fringe, as well as Centerville, Cambridge, and Richmond. So I looked back, I got some files over there, and the county and Hagerstown was actually in a little bit of a legal battle during the early 70s to control the 2 Mile fringe. The wording of the law at that time apparently was, at least the attorneys were reading it a little bit ambiguous, that it didn't really give the small communities the opportunity to take it back from the county. So you lost it again for a short period of time. Then the law was clarified, and it's pretty well what it is today. So the first handout below the agenda there is the zoning law that tells how you obtain the 2 Mile fringe. And so you did that in the late 70s, as well as Centerville, Hagerstown, or Cambridge, and Richmond. The county commissioners signed an ordinance that provided the 2 Mile fringe to all those communities, and they've had it ever since. There's a provision in there that if you wanted to extend the 2 Mile fringe, you either have to come to the county commissioners to get that permission, or if you provide city services into an area that you don't control the 2 Mile fringe, you can unilaterally expand it. Now, they don't define exactly what services are. They do say it's not fire protection. That's the only one they say that's not a city service. And generally, we're talking about electric and other utilities such as that. Wayne County as a whole, we have 14 different communities that have zoning. We are an advisory planning commission county, and we're one of the few in the state that does that. It's been that way for decades, honestly. So what that means is we have that many plan commissions throughout the county. So you can see the challenges it presents to get coordination between all the zoning codes when developers go from one jurisdiction to the other. We're different than our surrounding counties. Rush County, well, first of all, we have 14 incorporated communities in this county. Probably because the national road goes through here, and as we were moving west, all the things were developed. Because you compare it to Rush County, right? Rush County only has 4 incorporated communities, and they have an area plan commission. They have an area-wide plan commission.
So they have one planning commission for the entire county. Randolph County has 9 incorporated communities, and they too have one plan commission for the entire county. Union County has 2 towns, 2 cities. They have an area plan commission, 1 plan commission. Fayette has only 1 incorporated community, that's Connersville, and they have an area plan commission that covers the entire county. Delaware County has 7 incorporated communities, but the county and Muncie have a metropolitan plan commission, so they do their zone together. Now, Henry County is a little bit like us in that they're along the National Road. They have 16 communities that are incorporated, but 10 of them fall under Henry County's plan commission. They all have a joint plan commission, and there are no 2-mile fringes. So Wayne County is a little bit unique with the way our zoning is structured. We have 4 2-mile fringe areas. So that sets up some challenges. So if you go to the handout, the first document below that is the IC that shows how the 2-mile fringe are accomplished. The next thing on the agenda is the flood ordinance. So the flood ordinance runs concurrently with the jurisdiction of your plan commission. So your flood ordinance that you adopted in, I think, 2024 has the same jurisdiction as your zoning. And that's, if you look at the second handout, IC 1428-4. What that basically says is that this is under the flood management ordinance. You adopted your zoning ordinance under 36.7, so your flood ordinance follows the same jurisdiction as your zoning code. And that even makes sense. If you look at your flood ordinance, the appeal of the flood administrator's decision goes to your BZA, not to our BZA. So it makes sense, and this statute indicates that your flood ordinance has the same geographic area as your zoning code. Address. This actually falls under the jurisdiction of the planning commission. Now, for years, well, if you remember back in May, in the early 80s, the whole county went under one numbering system. And there's, north and south axis, east and west axis, so that all the numbering is consistent throughout the county. But plan commissions are the one that have the legal authority to do address. It's not post office, it's not county council, it's not city council, it's not town council, it's not 911. The plan commissions have the authority to number. Now, we've been doing that for Hagerstown, obviously, for decades. Unless you see a reason to change that, we'll continue to do that. But it's based on Google points. So, if you Google something on your navigation, it comes up the same point as the address that you plug into it. We issue a couple different types of addresses. One of it is a mailing address, no doubt. We also, in some cases, will issue an emergency address. There may not be a house there, for example, like the Girl Scout camp down on Potter Shop, where they may need an ambulance to come. So we would give that an address point. So there's some other scenarios that would happen, but we would issue we don't hand out addresses to vacant lots. So people won't use them for voting, for school districts, get mail there to avoid, whatever. So there's a specific process to get an address. Weeds. So we'll get this call from time to time, and I'm talking specifically the 2-mile fringe. Whose job is that? Wayne County does not have a weed ordinance. Years ago, we had a weed board that did enforcing. And in fact, that first IC code that I cite to you there, 15.16.7, is the establishment of a weed board. And there's certain types of weeds that they have authority to destroy. noxious weeds, and there's a list of them, what they are: Canadian thistle, Johnson grass, whackgrass. The second one then, 1516(8), is the township trustee. And that's if you don't have a weed board, or you don't have a weed ordinance. I assume you have one in town, weed ordinance. But in the county, we don't have a weed ordinance, so it falls on the township trustee. And there's a specific process that the township trustee has to go through to destroy noxious weeds. And then there's also a list of detrimental weeds. And in that definition, it includes noxious weeds and rank vegetation, which could be a lot of things. So it falls under the township trustee all over the township, regardless of whether it's in town or out of town. Unsafe structures. This is a specific statute, and you have the same authority, but it's within the incorporated area. It doesn't follow your zoning jurisdiction. The county also has this, but there's a specific process that you have to go through to declare an unsafe structure. There's specific elements that have to be present. It doesn't include blighted property. It doesn't include dilapidated property unless it rises to that level of unsafe. And there lies one of the problems. You'll get a complaint in your 2 mile fringe and it's a dilapidated property, but it may not rise to the level of unsafe. So we won't do anything with it. The next two.
And Steve, but that is definitely the 2 mile fringe that falls upon. Yeah.
Correct. In the unincorporated area of the county, all over. If the unsafe structure falls with us. Junk and litter and junk cart. Now here's the two really problem areas. Junk is to some people very precious. It's an important thing that they want to keep. I'm a pack rat myself, but my wife doesn't let me keep it outside. It all has to be inside. Litter, that's another thing. You know exactly what is litter, and you can see a home that's got a couch outside. It's got a broken down lawnmower. It's got a playground equipment that's in disrepair. All those particularly aren't junk, but it sure makes the problem bad. So it's really subjective, and this is one of the areas that I think is it's an issue in the 2 mile fringes because of who wants the other one to enforce. We'll get calls to enforce junk cars and junk. But I suggest to you, because if you look at your zoning ordinance, you have a definition of a private garage, of a public garage, and of a junkyard. In zoning, you can define those as you want. If you don't define a word in zoning, it has the ordinary and customary meaning of the English language. For example, you can define a kennel. A kennel is where dogs are kept, bred, fed, boarded, but you can define it to be a maximum of 10 dogs. And so if you have a kennel that's permitted and you define it as a maximum of only 10 dogs, if someone has 20 dogs, then it's not permitted. Even though a kennel, you think a kennel is a kennel, but you can define that. So you can define junk and litter. And it's a land use. It's how the land is being used. Now, I won't kid you, junk it's hard to define because, and some people collect it, they sell it. So when does it rise to the level of a business? If they're selling it back and forth. Junk cars, another thing. When is a junk car a junk car? Is it because when it doesn't operate? If it's not licensed, it looks junky. We have in our ordinance, if you have more than one inoperable or unlicensed car on your property, is a junk car. Now, that's our definition. You can make it 3, you can make it 4, whatever. But I think
So Steve, I want to understand on 6 and 7.
Yep.
If we define our ordinances,
I think you could.
then you're saying our decline of our ordinances rolls over to the 2 mile. frontage.
Absolutely.
Would
But not ordinances, it would be zoning,
Be a zoning word.
not an ordinance, because you can't enforce your ordinances outside
Zoning.
of the 2 mile.
And that,
Outside of,
and that's a good point. The town legislative body, the town council, you have to have an enabling statute to give you authority to go outside the town boundaries. An ordinance only goes to your city limits. Zoning allows you to do that outside your city limits because it's enabling. So you can define that however you want. You can define it. Again, I would encourage you to look at different zoning ordinances to see what fits you best. Now, the problem you're gonna run into, and I can tell you this, is just look around in your 2 mile fringe where you've got farmers who have some inoperative, they piece of equipment quits and they take it out along the fence line and it sits there. I know you've got one on North One that has grown. I'm not sure how that's zoned up there. I think it sits on the top of your aquifer.
It's in the floodplain.
It's in,
Ports of it.
or it's in floodplain, so all those you can control.
So if we define,
You gotta define.
if we define them, 6 and 7, who regulates it once we define it? Is
Your plan administrator.
not that fault would fall back underneath our plan.
In the 2 mile fringe, your zoning code would be the ordinance in place. Yeah. So that's the tough, is getting that coordination back and forth, because I have to admit to you that if you know, because I had the same conversation with the other communities that want the 2 mile fringe. I mean, let's face it, we're all strapped for manpower, person power to enforce our ordinances. And it's easy to dump it on somebody else. But this is the 2 tough areas, is how you clearly want to regulate that.
Steve, how does something, you change rule and now was acceptable is now not acceptable, for instance, not until around 1.
Yeah, so,
How does the grandfather clause?
yeah, so I don't want to pick on somebody, but so if you, whenever you pass, and this is in zoning only. So whenever you pass it, everything that exists at the time of passage becomes illegal, non-conforming. So you can't make it go away,
Right,
but you can keep it from getting bigger. So if it's a non-conforming use that exists, when you pass a new zoning ordinance, it gets to stay, but it cannot expand or get bigger, enlarge, intensify. So agricultural structures, and this is another one. So what's an agricultural structure? Someone will come in and want to build a permit, and they'll say, I want to build an ag barn. And it's generally a pole barn construction, but they're not going to use it for any agricultural purposes, but they call it an ag barn. And so we've tried to make it really clear what agricultural purposes mean. It generally doesn't mean you're parking an RV in it, or you got a heated workshop in it. You know, it's where you got cattle, you're storing hay, you got feed stored in there, you're storing your tractors in there. So, and this goes clear back to the 50s. Our ordinance with respect to agricultural structures, we don't require a permit. They require a zoning IFP. But it's just been something because, you know, typically we gave the farmers that break, if you will, and it's just carried forward. But what we're seeing today is that as the farm goes away and you have these structures that were built with no inspections whatsoever, then they're wanting to convert these to something as an accessory structure or something that's no longer agriculture. And they may not meet any sort of code because they weren't built with any sort of inspections. And so that's one of the things we're wrestling with now with our permits for ag buildings. We're considering just changing that and requiring inspections on all buildings, regardless of whether they're used for agriculture or not. Just simply because we're seeing so many of them being converted to something other than ag. And then, so if you issue in the 2 mile fringe, if you issue an ILP, zoning ordinance, or zoning permit for an ag building, then we're not gonna issue a building permit. It's your call, whatever you consider. And I'm sure that the definition is different in all 4 jurisdictions that have the 2 mile fringe. But we recognize your ILP, if you call it an ag barn, then we won't sell a permit to it. Now, we've got one up on Baker that,
I saw that stop work up there today, I went by there,
pardon me,
saw your stop work
Yeah.
notice on here.
So- the scenario is this, so the guy told you it was an ag barn. And got an ag barn permit, built the barn, nice barn, beautiful barn. Now he's got business in it. And, got a sign, everything, so that kicks it up to, my thinking is, so we put a stop order on it because of the use of, because of the building. But I think your ILP goes away.
Well, A1's not zoned for that type of retail sale.
Correct, so you've got a zoning issue.
Right.
And now we've got a building issue because he's got customers coming into it, it probably needs a construction design release. So we both got to do something with this. If you
I
want.
agree.
Okay.
I just wanted you to have a first swipe at it.
Yeah,
Because I had a face-to-face conversation and he got loud real fast and I said, I'm gonna stand here and let you yell
so
at it.
I think, he's either got to get a variance from the BZA to have it.
It's not undoable. I mean, it's
Yeah,
not
it's
something that
fixable.
can't be.
Yep.
But,
Correct.
so I want to ask this. So if the BZA gives him a variance, okay? So now it's shown to have his business in it, but the
It's not
building.
zone, it's not, the zone didn't change. He has a
And
variance,
variance too, so,
Yeah.
but the building was still not built,
that's correct, so.
It's there.
so you still have to go back
Yeah.
and we'll have to control that side.
Yep. Yeah, so what would happen? First of all, he's not permitted to be there at all at this point. So he needs to go through the BZA process. There's no use to us going after him if he's not permitted to be there in the first place.
Right.
So it seems to me that his first step is to apply for the variance through your BZA. And if he's successful, then he's permitted to be there. Then at that point, we're gonna say to him, okay, you're gonna have to have an engineer go in there and tell us that this thing's been built to the code, or it being a substitute to the code. The engineer's gonna have to sign off on it, or he's gonna have to remove some metal for us to seize the structure.
It was floating from what I understand.
Oh, really? Okay.
I mean, you got Cully right across the street. And,
Yeah.
you know, when they go by and they see
Sure.
ditches dug and pipes sticking up out of the ground and
So there's a 2 mile fringe issue that both of us have some, you know, a dog in the fight. And I think it starts with you guys, because if it's not permitted to be there, then there's no use to us going after it. And then construction inspection. This is the one, Chris, that you and I talked. So the last handout. So your utility, best that I can see, will bid around since the flood. And in your current ordinance was codified in 1992. But it's older than that. I think it was written because I was on the town council and we codified that in 92. And I think it was written in 77. So that part of your ordinance is what, 50 years old? And you can see this law was made in 1981. So that's, again, I don't want to get, if you think the lawyer's got to work this out, but I don't think that your utility ordinance with respect to the inspection of the house has jurisdiction. I think you do up into the meter, but anything beyond the meter, I think because of this law, falls within the jurisdiction of the county. Your ordinance also presents a couple different things. If you looked at it, which I'm sure you have, it's more strict than the NEC. You require no less than 12 gauge, which the
Yes.
NEC you can have 14. You're.
There's a whole lot wrong.
Yeah, your ordinance requires all 28 breakers where you can have 15. So your ordinance, if in fact you inspected a house in the 2 mile fringe in your utility jurisdiction, the ordinance is more restrictive than the NEC. That sets up a problem because we're gonna inspect it to go with the NEC. Now, I don't know whether that answers your question. I don't think your ordinance is valid in the 2 mile fringe.
Yeah, that answers my question. Another question I had on the 2 mile fringe, for our electric customers in the 2 mile fringe. If a building or structure is vacant for 6 months, we always have either our electric lead or building inspector inspect the panel first.
Yeah.
So would that still be an example of where he could inspect it, or will we need to call the county at that point?
So we've got same thing.
Yeah.
So see, I think that ordinance that you're talking about is only valid in the community, in the city limits. Going back to what Bill said.
Okay,
It's not a zoning ordinance, so you don't have the legislative power
that's a good point.
to make
Okay.
the ordinance in the
Yep,
unincorporated
you're right.
area.
That goes with that goes down rather than the utility, yeah.
Richmond does the same thing. They've got the same ordinance that if you've had a disconnect more than 6 months, they require it to be inspected before it's energized. But we don't do it because we're not subject to the ordinance. And I gotta tell you, just as a philosophical position, Richmond wants the whole thing inspected. Well, I can't see behind the walls. I don't know what's happening in there, so I'm not gonna sign off on something like that. And you're saying you just look at the panel, so. Now, could we do an interlocal agreement? Statute provides for that. You feel real bent on that. If you want to, if you want to inspect that, well,
There's some situations, especially with barns, with barns where they might not have electric in for 2 or 3 years and all of a sudden they have electric back in them, that it would be nice to have some additional inspection at the panel before we put a meter in. So. Other than that, it's not real common. There aren't very many abandoned houses in the tomorrow.
so I'm telling you that if something, if Hagerstown feels that you need to do something like that, I'm willing to. I mean, it would take the town council and commissioners to do an interlocal agreement, not you and me.
Sure, yeah.
But if that is something that you feel is important, then let's talk about it.
I've done one of those reconnect inspections since I've been here, a year, January, just on the south edge of town on Washington Street, where the mini junkyard is.
The major.
And it had been off 2 or 3 years.
That's correct.
And
So we just want to look at the panel itself, but not the house wiring.
so the panel was in the basement and you go down and in and it's right there, and immediately you see wiring cut, open junction boxes, stuff put together with light cords. I did walk through the whole house. I didn't give her a lot of stuff in writing. She was kind of taking notes. And about 3 or 4 months later, I went back at her request, and everything that we had talked about was taken care of and it got turned on.
I guess I would only just simply,
But you can't unsee something.
I understand that, but what if they said, no, I'm not gonna do it? Show me the law, that makes me do it.
So I do have a question though. So if a town ordinance says that, we're the holder of the electric, we're the ones that, hold the key per se to turn the electric on, and turn it off. If our town ordinance says that we're not going to turn it on without an inspection, and you say, well, the county doesn't adhere to ours, which that makes sense.
Right.
But we as the town can still say, well, homeowner that lives in the 2 mile fringe, we're still not turning it on. We have an inspector that can come and inspect it. You don't allow him in, that's fine. We're still not turning it on.
Yeah.
Unless you allow a person to come in and do it. That would be, to me, that
I think
is sensible.
that has something to consider. I'm not gonna.
Right.
argue the validity of it,
Right.
but, I'm certainly on that to ask your attorney,
Yeah.
but. But know that we're still gonna sell a permit and still inspect it from that perspective. If it,
So if Tom's seen something like that, there's no harm in Tom, he's seen it, like.
but what are you gonna do if they say, no, you can't come in?
Well.
Well, this
but in
person called and wanted it and agreed.
In this situation, you saw, so in that situation, he's seen it. Couldn't he have reached out to you folks, or would you come in and evaluate it?
Well, sure, we had one. In fact, when I called you over and went on Teeter Road, I thought that was Hagerstown Utility, and which is surprising, it's a two, just right across the street from there.
the street.
And that was a bad one. And, now, if that had been Hagerstown Utility, obviously we would have worked with you rather than Duke, but yeah, we've had that before.
So it's just a matter of communicating.
It is, but it's, and then understanding who's got the legal authority
Right.
to enforce it. But I just don't think that your utility ordinance, the way it's written, has that authority out there. And if it takes an interlocal agreement to have that, I'm sure the commissioners would consider that. There's no reason not to.
And what you're saying, it doesn't have authority to basically twist your arm per se,
Yeah.
to go out and do that inspection. But if the town says, we're not turning electric on without an inspection.
Yeah.
The homeowner wouldn't have an option. We're not enforcing it upon.
What if they said, and again, you have, what if they said, hey, I'll bring my own private electrician in and let him certify it, but I'd probably be a cleaner way to have an interlocal
Mhm.
agreement.
And we do have a significant number of houses. We have about 250 that are that are on our electric, but outside of our town.
That's
So it is that many,
Wow.
yeah.
So I wonder if the public utility has the authority to determine
But
that.
see, there's the kicker.
Even though you're-
You don't belong to the IURC,
Okay.
you're in under ordinance, it's a town department.
Mhm.
So it's not a public utility per se.
If IMPA took it over, that would be different.
Yeah, that's right. So it doesn't fall under those rules. It's a town utility. And, anyway, but I think, but to alleviate your concerns, I think we can fix it.
Okay.
Because then because, we look at both sides, we're trying to protect the town too.
Understand.
So I'm gonna go back to Dylan's situation, so, they don't let us in, we turn on the electricity, and 2 weeks later, the house burns down, and they said, hey, you turn on electricity, you burn down our house. So are we liable for the?
I'm not gonna.
Well, and my comment to that, Brian, would,
I don't want to overstep our boundaries, but yet, the planning commission, we have to take this serious that we have it right, so that we don't jeopardize the town council and the town to get into lawsuits and have losses that we could have addressed. And not trying to be mean and not trying to.
No, I'm
just trying to say.
I'm just trying to, you need the authority to do it. And I'm not sure you have it right now, but I think we could fix it.
and my comment to that, Brian, would be, we would be following our own ordinances. That was the point I was trying to make with, that instance. If it's in the 2 mile fringe, you don't have to follow ordinance, it's fine, but we're going to follow our ordinance.
Is there any part of the utilities jurisdiction that's outside the 2 mile fringe?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, we go all the way
You go
up
into Henry County?
to, we do go into Henry County, we go all the way up to Lamar Road. So where Morris Black lived at, that was on our electric. And, so it's 950 east or whatever, we do go into Henry County fairly. We probably have a dozen customers in Henry County.
So that's a whole nother story there, because your ordinance wouldn't go into Henry County.
Well, that's a good point.
But, and then the fact that it goes outside of 2 mile fringe seems to make sense to me, that we would just want to have an interlocal agreement to spell out what your responsibilities would be with respect to new hookups or hookups that's been involved for 6 months. Because it wouldn't necessarily be whatever you found let's say we had that agreement and you said, hey, this has got a new panel. Then they come and get a permit from us and we inspect the panel. You're inspecting it from if it's safe to hook up. And would you look at it if it's not? It's a grandfathered in system, not to be extreme, but what if it's novel tube?
Common tube's a leak wiring system unless
But
it's
it's
insulated.
existing.
Hmm?
It's existing.
It's legal unless the walls in a balloon construction house have insulation blown in them.
And it's existing.
It's existing.
Yeah. And it's hard to make somebody change an existing system.
Yeah.
That just,
I've done thousands of reconnecting.
So, yeah.
Since the time I was there.
so. Unless you got some other questions, Chris, I think,
No, that's extremely beneficial. I think it's good for Dolan and Brian both on the council, so we've all heard the same things. I think that's great.
And just to give you a little bit of update, I mean, Donnie had talked to Steve and, but the tricky, Tom we're responsible for Tom and giving him direction. And so we thought it was important that we all understood what the rules were and where the boundaries are, and we have a problem that we as the planning commission, we need to address this in some way.
don't misunderstand. It's fixable. I think,
That's what I'm saying, it's fixable, but we need, it's not, if we don't address it, it's not gonna get fixed.
and I have no sacred cow on this. If you want to inspect your electric after it's been disconnected, don't go for it. Okay?
Okay. I just got two questions.
Yes, sir.
I wrote down. So in the fringe, just so that I'm clear, so the final say on permits, inspections, enforcement in the 2 mile fringe of that's permits, all that stuff, that is under the county,
What kind of permit?
building permits,
Building permit, not zoning permits.
right?
Yeah.
So building permits are issued by the county in the 2 mile fringe.
Yes.
And then have we issued those out?
Have we what?
Any building permits in the 2 mile fringe?
No, not since I've been here.
Okay,
Yeah. Bob did a couple times.
okay. And then,
And we can't issue any building permits without a zoning permit
Yeah,
first.
we won't issue one. If it's new construction or something that requires zoning, we won't issue a permit unless you give us a zoning permit.
so then,
So in the situation where you have an existing structure and I don't issue a zoning permit for construction just because they're doing construction.
Yeah, if they're putting in a new kitchen inside.
If you're putting something on the parcel that wasn't on the ground, covering square footage of land,
Right.
that thing requires an improvement location permit.
If you are changing use, if you're intensifying use.
Yes.
Or if you're enlarging the
If
footprint.
you're changing the footprint, putting something new, you're pouring a slab, you're putting a pool, you're putting whatever it is, a fence, if necessary.
Now, see, we don't permit fences.
Depending on whether or not it's in the floodplain.
Yeah.
That's a whole other story.
That's a whole nother story, but there have been times where a person went to get a permit at the county and the county said, we need to see your improvement location permit. Well, I didn't issue one because it didn't require me to issue one.
And
So I produced a letter stating that,
or an email would work, because we don't know all your, we have to match up with everybody's cell code, so, and they're all different.
Yeah.
So if there's a particular use or remodel that you won't issue an ILP to, or it's not in your
not
code,
required.
just ship us an email and say,
And we've done that.
Yeah.
A handful of times, but that's happened.
So, yeah, driveway permits would be up to obviously the county highway department if we're out in the 2 mile fringe.
county.
Zoning would be you.
On
And
county.
yeah, on county road.
I was on a state highway, it's, but the other issue that we've had recently, and this can encompass all of it, is the upgrade to the mobile home park on Jones Road. I mean, that's got floodplain, it's got zoning issues, it's got electrical issues, it's got construction issues. And it's got Indiana State Department of Health issues that all those agencies had a hand in that.
And it's still ongoing.
Yeah.
They're not quite there yet.
Anything else that I can answer? Does that make sense?
You had my morning.
Yeah, just one more.
I'm sorry.
I promise I'm done.
That's all right.
So then obviously, Tom communicates with your guys' office, what sounds to be fairly frequent then, right? Back and forth, and you guys have communication with each other.
Yes.
So is there any gaps that need to be filled with responsibility, communication? Like, do you guys
No.
have any concerns that, we could do better, or Tom has any concerns that, hey, this maybe could be communicated better, just so that we're all on the same page?
I think just understanding, just like the weeds, If you call us, if you got a property in the 2 Mile Fringe that's got tall weeds, we're not gonna do anything with it. And so I would ask that you don't go on the spot and say, hey, the county won't do anything with it. And that's why we don't do anything with it. And I think that would be a hard one to enforce anyway, unless you focused on a certain type of density of residential properties. I mean, when do you start enforcing high weeds on a farm? Because some places have their hayfield right up next to the house. When I look at condition of properties, getting back to the junk and litter, this is a tough one for me even to define that. Because, you go out and you tell somebody to clean up their property, but then I go down and look at NDOT's property at 170, and that's tough. So, anyway.
So to carry on, in the mobile home park, RV park, it's more RV park now supposedly.
Is that what they said? Put them on yield or put the hitch on?
Yeah, they're the two that have to be moved. I've seen correspondence from DNR to them, and she thinks that she can put the ton on, wheels on, and make it mobile again, but it's not a licensed vehicle. It has to have a VIN and a plate to be able to be called a recreational vehicle.
Gotcha.
So that can't stay where it is. I don't know if she believes that yet or not.
But, okay, so, this is getting, this whole thing, park's getting a little touchy, okay, so. We defined that it's gotta have a VA, a number, VIN number. Okay. Or
That's actually.
But that's not us to determine that, that's DNR to determine that. right?
So
I mean, we can't be doing DNR's work,
what you do through the flood ordinance, that's in your flood ordinance.
so if it's in our flood ordinance, then he has to.
Yes.
I mean, that whole thing out there is pretty confusing. Who is responsible for what?
Well, just because there's so many players in it, zoning is obviously yours. The licensing of the park is the state's. The floodplain management is yours through your flood ordinance. The building permits, and there's the kicker, because we don't go into licensed mobile home parks, because the State Department of Health actually goes in and inspects some of that. Now, I've talked to the guy from the State Department of Health who oversees this particular park, and they're really shorthanded. I mean, there's no question. He covers, I think he said, over 1,000 mobile home parks, and there's just no way that he can monitor all that. And he would prefer that we pass an ordinance to do that, to do the electrical and the installation. And that's the other thing.
Yeah.
When you pull these things in, not the RVs, it's got to be a licensed hauler. And they can't move those in there without a licensed hauler. So there's multiple jurisdictions.
So you say they would want, you said we to pass an ordinance.
Are you county government?
Well, not us.
No.
See, that's what,
Good Southside City.
that's what gets.
We don't have electric out there, we have water and sewage, but we don't have electric.
What
What does that do?
That is too, yeah.
Good grief, we go clean out
I know, isn't that crazy?
It's a really weird, yeah.
and then when.
So- So that's what the state wants us to do, because we remember we had the one over on 40 Clover, what's that, Green Meadows, Green Meadows. We got one at Salisbury, Cloverleaf, and they've all got problems. And because the state just can't handle them all. And so they would like us to pass an ordinance to do the electrical inspections in it. But my gosh.
So not to beat a dead horse, but specifically on the two units that are the most current issue there.
Yeah.
Those are in the floodway.
Yeah,
There's all three zones on that parcel.
yeah.
There's
And it goes a little
flood
bit to that
fringe.
one to the east.
Yeah, that one's okay.
Well,
Well,
the one to the east, it's got a little flood zone on the west part of that property, but I think they're gonna put the house up on the hill, I think.
So the way I see the map, if you're looking north from a certain point on the drive, the front west corner is in the floodway.
Yes,
The front east corner is in the 100-year flood fringe.
yeah,
And on back, it's in the 2%,
yeah, I think in the,
and
where
0.2%.
the house itself, in the floodway,
I don't.
the house itself.
I think it is.
Yeah.
I have to look at the map again.
Of course,
There's three zones there.
Yeah, it's been there, so it's okay. Unless it burnt or something like
Right.
that.
So for the two, they have to be moved per the DNR because they control the
The floodway.
floodway.
Yeah.
So that's not up to me to make those move.
They have, the DNR. has
Those
to
are in
check
the
that.
floodway, not the fringe.
Correct.
But
That- that's
Nicole,
correct.
but Nicole said that it was us, not the DNR. When she came from the library.
Well, see, there, and I believe what you're saying. We've got one just like that, and,
That's what's been very,
and they DNR punted it to us. One you had today.
Oh, yes,
The
yeah.
greenhouse,
Yes. There's a fringe.
yeah. DNR went out there and said, no, it's not us. They put it over the fringe.
So the other question on the electric part, and several months ago, mid last year, the people from the park wanted an inspection, called the main office, sent me out there for some reason, thinking it was on Hagerstown Electric. It was on Duke Energy. So I was told by the owner that they had tried to get the county to come out to approve turning this existing pedestal on. And was told they don't do mobile home park,
That's
even
correct.
electric.
That's correct.
So here I'm standing there and they're desperate to get this
You
thing turned back
look at
on.
you look at the rules of the licensee. So this would.
No, the mobile home park.
Yeah, so the
Mhm.
licensee of the mobile home park is responsible. The first, they got several choices. And they got to, the fact that they hold this license, they are required to ensure that electric is up to the NEC code. So they are the first person responsible. And then it's the state responsible to ensure that they've done that, not you and me.
So then you've got the third party, which is the one who holds the gold, called Duke Energy. It's the
Yeah.
golden rule. I was
Yeah.
told this a long time ago.
Yeah.
He who has the gold makes the rule. And when they say we won't turn it on until someone tells us it's acceptable.
Yeah.
She gets the guy on the phone and hands it to me. And I told her this is not my jurisdiction. This is not, of course, this is on your utility
Yeah.
company. But I have looked at it and my opinion is
Thank you.
it's accepted, it's a service, but I'm not
Thank you.
authorized to tell you that.
Yeah.
And so they energized.
Yeah,
That was my only dealing there with the.
and
So then who inspects that? So if you can't inspect it, the county won't go inspect
It's
it.
the property owner, the operator's responsibility to
And
figure
that,
out.
that's one of those gray holes, because, RPNL's same way. They won't go out. Now, it's not a mobile home park, but they won't put a new meter on unless it's been inspected. And we won't inspect it unless they come get a permit. Now, we don't issue permits in mobile home parks. In this case, well, it's because the licensing, the way the license criteria reads, it's the license holder's responsibility. And now, it's Duke's policy, that's their policy, and, our legislative bodies can't impact that.
it's almost about like what Dylan said. Hey, we're not gonna energize it until you get inspected, but we're not inspected. It's kind of like what you
Yeah.
just said. You don't have to get inspected, but we're not gonna energize. You kind of get lost there. I mean, so we don't like Tom taking the heat or the town taking the heat, like, you know, we're overstep, when we get
It's like
stuck.
I don't like to eat for weeds.
Yeah, but if, we get stuck in these, you know, we get stuck.
I don't disagree with you, Brian, not at all. And that's tough, in my personal opinion is, on both of our flood ordinances, that should never been allowed to increase. That was down to 4 or 5 mobile homes since the original owner passed away. Over the years, there have been mobile homes moved out of there. If the DNR, and I'll be frank with you, I called the DNR. How did the state health department issue this license when this is in a floodplain, in a floodway? That should never happen.
Right. But it was
But they did.
It was flood ordinances
When it started.
originally.
But they took it away. They took, if you had a house in the floodway right now and you tore it down, you couldn't put it back.
Right.
So why should you be able to put a mobile home park back?
That's kind of what happened. Now I'm gonna show my age here, but.
Well, you
But down, yeah, but down by IGA, there was
Yeah.
some homes down there, and that one year we had that flooding where it almost covered the roofs of them. So once they took them out,
Just put it back in.
they could not put them back in. Once they come out, that can never be
It's the
repopulated.
same way. And so, but it's not your fault. It's not our fault. The State Department of Health issued the license. And I think they issued it unbeknownst to the flood zone. Because I think they were surprised. But that's a state agency, it's not gonna be,
Right.
so now we've got that to live with.
Thank you.
Anything else?
You're quiet. You got anything?
I appreciate,
I do,
yeah.
a small question. The purpose of zoning is to determine land use,
Thank you.
correct?
yes,
Okay, we can make that as restrictive as we want or as loose as we want.
yep.
Okay.
There are some counties, back to Sullivan County, who just landed that big data center. They have no zoning. And so that's what was attracting to that data center to go there, because Sullivan County has no zoning. We're one of 16 counties left in the state that has advisory plan commission law. The rest of them have gone to either one large plan commission or a joint plan commission, so we're getting far and few between. I appreciate the opportunity.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for taking your
Yeah,
time.
and you wanna talk about an interlocal agreement, we need to. Yeah, okay, sounds great, thank you. Okay, Steve. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay,
Well, I'm just drank from the fire days.
yeah. Well, from that, it sounds to me like that section you said, there's a lot wrong with this section. That we have,
In the electrical.
right, like we have more stringent rules than NEC does. And we should probably just make them the same.
Well, I would encourage you to completely delete any specifications on installation means and methods beyond the service drop. And a whole nother subject is whether or not the owner of the property should be responsible for burying their own underground cable to the pole. Or whether that should be on the utility, that's a whole different argument there, because I'm sure that's happened over and over and over through the years. But the electric utility company shouldn't have any say as to the code or installation standards of beyond it's called the point of service. That's where the National Electrical Code and the National Electrical Safety Code meet. Your utility company is governed by the National Electrical Safety Code, and the point of service is normally on an overhead service where the wire or the pipe and wire go up from a meter base to the gooseneck where the weatherhead is. The point of service on overhead is where that's crimped together. the wire coming down that pipe is not the utilities to govern, because it's required to be sized per the National Electrical Code, which covers the load of what's going on in there. The wire sizing is strictly regulated. And so the point of service is where it needs to stop. On underground, since underground here in Hagerstown is installed by the owner, then the National Electrical Code should be able to determine the size of the wire, the depth of the burial, the type of the pipe that runs up the pole, and the point of service becomes where it's crimped together up on the pole. There's nothing in your ordinance that says that Hagerstown has to be the only one that connects it up there. You leave it wide open for someone to throw a ladder up there and determine, I'm just gonna put my H taps on this one, and this one, because it's an owner installed service drop going underground. That needs to be completely stopped. It needs to be specific in that the utility company's responsibility starts where the wire comes out of the ground and we put the riser up. You get someone putting up a steel piece of pipe thinking that's part of their responsibility, and it hits the conductors and they get killed. That needs to be changed. But the ordinance allowing the utility to govern the wiring methods beyond the point of service should not be anywhere in there. That's what the National Electrical Code does. And the state of Indiana determines which edition of the National Electrical Code, and they offer their amendments. They make some things a little easier, some things a little harder. The state determines what that code is.
So then, Tom, what you're saying then, if it's in the city limits, then it's your responsibility to make sure that all electrical is up to standard, if it's in the city limits.
When you say all of the electrical, are you talking the customer side?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. In the 2 mile fringe, it's just our responsibility to make sure that knuckle that you're.
Well, the point of service
Yes.
is where your responsibility stops.
Stop.
Whether that be where it's crimped together at the overhead gooseneck or
So,
otherhead.
so in the 2 mile fringe, then that's where Steve's crew comes in, and then they have to inspect from there on down to make sure that it meets code.
As long as it's not a trailer park.
Unless it's underground. Which really needs to be,
So if it's underground, whose responsibility is it?
the owner's installing it. I mean,
There's only one place in our service area that it's our responsibility, and that's Savannah Estates, but even that is our installation of it, and I've always even had qualms about that, because if we aren't responsible for it underground anywhere else, who's responsible for it now that it's installed? We should immediately wash our hands of it once it's installed, and then it becomes owner's responsibility. So.
So then is it safe to say that you need to bring to planning commission next meeting these ordinances and where you think we need to stop, what needs to go out? So we can study that, determine that, and then once we get it that way, John might have to do some writing on it, then it goes to town council for them to approve it. So I just think that's imperative, that some of these issues that's causing this problem, that we can address. It's pretty obvious that your trailer park's a mess. Okay, we're not gonna ever address it, the county's not ever gonna address it. The state gave a permit they probably shouldn't have gave, but so be it. There we are. You can't worry about something that's already been done. But some of this going forward, I just think it's imperative that we get it right. And we get it to town council and get these things changed. It seems like to me, if we want to do some inspection on boxes, Steve's pretty willing to work with us in the 2 mile fringe.
yeah, I have some email kind of to that effect from
So-
the situation on James Road.
So if we want to, if we want to proceed with that, I think that's going to be fairly easy to do as well. So I think plan commission just needs to decide what to do.
Yeah, I would say next meeting. Under your advice, Tom, here's what really needs, you just said earlier, just delete this part. Is there anything that you think we need to add for clarification that is not currently there?
I'll work on that.
Okay,
Because if you'll think about, he asked us to make the changes, the things. The one change on the fees or something like that.
Max 500.
I mean, once.
Right.
once Made that recommendation, town council had John get that all worded properly. And then when it come back and worded properly, then town council made that motion, passed that, but it still all had to come, the recommendation in the process had to come from the plan commission to town council on what year.
Has that been deleted? Is that official?
I think so.
Yeah,
I think didn't we pass it the year ago?
I think we passed it.
I think so, because that was the one we suspended the rules on to pass.
I'm pretty sure it is.
That was the appendix.
Yes, yeah, I think it did. Now I'm gonna second guess myself and.
Good to know. We're getting close to that.
Yeah, which I think is why we tried to hurry up.
well, Tom, is there anything specific from your report that you feel is pertinent to point out?
So your neighbor on his barn building there, like I said, I mean, with wintertime and promised action, and you can't do much when it's that kind of weather, so this is the point where this is about to shift gears, and so we're likely going to have a structure that we're gonna be bringing in, say, building commission to demolish. That's, I wouldn't be surprised a bit. Having trouble getting hold of Brenda, the actual property owner, not returning any calls, certified originally, it was never delivered to her. So I've been dealing with her son-in-law, but I've got to put it on the timeline and, make something happen there. So does that seem reasonable to push forward on
Yeah.
that particular building?
Yeah.
There's two more that are very similar on the south side of town. First Street down from Main, corner of not Elm, but the alley between Elm and then there's two buildings that are also leaning full of stuff.
Two-story shed.
They're a block apart. So if we do one, do we need to be looking at trying to get those other two either in compliance or gone?
Yeah,
Okay.
so, yeah, they look like they could fall over.
Yeah, so the roof sheeting starting to blow each one, I mean,
Make
they
them
can put a person in half, that's the form.
Yeah. Not good.
Brewing company, the parents are now the other partners in that financial venture. According to the mom a week or two ago. And,
Can I interject something? there?
sure,
I got a hold of him, Aaron. And, we're probably gonna ask him to do an update to town council, and if he comes, I will try to make sure we get an open invitation out to everybody on planning commission too, because the reason we gotta have him come in and talk is, the weird thing about this is they kicked out one of the partners, but on their, EDC loan they did, the partner that they kicked out, his name's still on that loan. And I, you know, it's kind of, never had that happen before. Now, and I want to say this, they have not missed a payment. They've been on time on everything. It's not a concerning of the payment. It's that contract they signed has changed. And I don't know that the town wants to move forward with that, with those names on there. We might have to change that. But I told him when we talked about that, he needed to give us an update where they're at, what they're doing, how it's coming along. And I'm sure everybody on this committee would like to hear that too. So we'll try to let you know when he's coming in.
other than that, on the handout that I gave you, there's nothing that just, other than Manchester's got their construction design release for foundation only. So they're probably not too far from getting the whole package on a construction design release. The contractors from Smurley came in, brought the drawings, which need to have a lot of supplemental stuff submitted. I think there's a particular building manufacturer that's done all the steel and the components of the steel structure. There's no drawings on the building other than some very rudimentary foundation drawings, and so I need to get plans from the company that.
No real renderings of anything.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of open holes. Anyway, they mentioned they're hoping to start excavating on that foundation permit release on the 11th. So they've turned in an application for the full package of a $3 million project, 44,000 square feet plus or minus. And so I've told them likely 7 to 10 days to review and get everything I need to be okay with. Once I issue that permit, it's issued. So I want to have my questions answered and the details in place that I need to be able to see what I'm looking at. So with that limit removed, I feel more comfortable issuing that permit for what it needs to be.
I will check with Julie tomorrow to make sure. I'm almost certain we did, but
I know there was
stuff to check with her.
kind of a motion to move forward with that, and John commented he wasn't sure if it had to be public notice. Well, public notice of the meeting is sufficient probably. There just seemed to be some uncertainty.
Yeah, I would double check with Julie on that. What have they been doing out there?
They've been doing grade work, laying out, staking out, knocking off the tops of the higher elevations that needed to disappear. They've done some retention pond work. So
My whole house turns into a vibrating chair.
yeah, they've been running the roller vibrator.
Moving the air.
patch.
Yeah, when I've been setting my recliner, I'm like, well, that's a good vibrating chair, but I guess they've been doing a lot of work out there.
All right, does anybody have any other old business? I think we could consider the discussion about professionalizing Tom's position as old business. And I have some new thoughts on that old business. Apparently someone on the council wanted it to come back to us to provide justification. And, you know, I was talking with Chad last week or whatever it was, we kind of got our heads together about it. Yeah, you know, the permitting and all of that, the money that comes in for that is good, but I don't think that's why it's justified. And I think most people would agree it's justified because it's our insurance policy, because we are liable for the construction that occurs in our community and how it's wired and all of this kind of thing. And we need a person who follows the code by the letter. Because if he should say, oh, I'm not going to inspect that, and something bad happens, you mentioned the house gets fired, like somebody dies or something horrible like that, we're liable. Or if he says, I'll let that slide and something bad happens, well, he's not gonna do that, right? And we need somebody like that. And that, I think, in and of itself, regardless of how much permitting money is coming in, it justifies the position. Absolutely. And so it was brought to my attention that a contractor approached Alan and said to him that he's fed up and he and a bunch of other contractors are going to be at the meeting tomorrow and they're going to complain about you. And I said, well, what's the complaint? He said, well, he said he made a comment. I don't know who this person is. It doesn't really matter. He said, well, he doesn't have to do everything by the letter. And I thought, well, yes, he does. And so I said, I'm not going to put any words in your mouth, but if I were in your position and these contractors show up to start, a complaint session, my question would be, has anyone here to denote any time our inspector did not follow the code? And the answer will be no, and there's no more to talk about. It's my opinion.
So Dylan brought this up to my attention that that might happen, and I believe Gil and I have come to the agreement that Tom ultimately is responsible for this group. So if they have some specifics, which Dylan couldn't find any specifics, but if they have specifics, we're gonna tell them that we're gonna table their conversation and that they have to come to the plan commission and bring it to the plan commission. And the plan commission sees that it needs to go to town council, it will evolve up, but Tom is ultimately responsible to the plan commission, not town council. And so, I'm just gonna say this, you know, Tom will say, that Tom knows this, I mean, I've had a project, we're getting closer to, I've had a project going on in my house, and I've asked Tom to come in and look at the work that's been done, and I've asked whatever contractor it's been, construction contractor or the electrical people. And Tom has been very professional. He's asked for a couple things to be added, very minor. My contractors had no problem doing what Tom asked to do. And me as a homeowner, I had no problem to see that it was done right, and if it was gonna be additional cost to me, which the hurricane clamps, the 4 of them was 89 cents a piece, so you see what that cost me. But me as the homeowner, I spent quite a bit of money doing this, more than I can imagine it should cost, but I spent quite a bit of money, so in the end, I want it right. I don't wanna spend all this money to find out that it was wrong, so. I mean, I've been on plan commission, I sat on town council, but I've also had Tom inspecting my house and talking to my contractors. And Tom, I think you'll say we've had 0 issues with our contractors that you work with at my house. Nobody got upset, I just did what had to be done. Tom made one comment, he said, I think they over constructed a little bit, which is good, that made me feel good.
Well, if you build it to exactly the standards of the code, you've done the bare minimum to be legal.
Yeah.
So overbuilding is okay.
I had a comment to me that you were too picky, and I said, thank God.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of the point.
And,
You have to be picky where you're supposed to be. You're
Yeah.
supposed to be picky. Right.
and I have had a tremendous amount of conversations with, contractors, town employees, generalized members of the public, and, it's always interesting to hear, different perspectives, and, one of the things that, kind of like you said was, they're gonna come in here, I'm not gonna deal with them anymore, they're not gonna do contract work in Hagerstown, and I sat and I think, okay, well, what's the bigger picture here, why do they not wanna do work in Hagerstown? And I think of Tom, and I think his mannerisms, and I think of his enforcement, and I think of his knowledge of our code. And if they're worried that their work isn't up to par to what Tom is saying, you have to use this, and this, and you have to do it by this way, and this way. And if they're not doing it that way, I think it's doing a disservice to our residents, because I am a resident that if a contractor came in and said, yeah, I'm gonna do it this way, and this way, I don't understand that stuff.
Right.
So I'd say, okay, man, I mean, you're the guy building it, so
Right.
you must know what's best. And I'm paying for that service.
Right.
But if Tom comes in and says, you paid for this service, but they didn't use the type of wire that they were supposed to, they didn't use the type of wood they were supposed to, a person that doesn't understand that, I'd be like, oh my gosh, you did me a service. And that service is worth investing in. And, so my comment back to the contractor that can be shared with the other contractors is if they're nervous about Tom inspecting their work, I don't want them doing work in Hagerstown anyway.
Exactly.
Is that too brash?
It's
Maybe,
not-
but
People are still gonna bill,
Yeah.
right? And they're just gonna lose out on the work,
yes,
because someone's gonna do it.
Yeah.
Right, so that's not really a threat to me.
correct.
And if they like to get around the code and the rules, then I don't want those contractors
Correct.
building in Hagerstown anyway.
And during our council meeting, one of the things that was brought up, and there was a level that I did agree and understand was, that, they said, with Tom's current responsibilities, his current responsibilities doesn't justify full-time employment, 40 hours a week, and this added cost to the town. There's a part of that I do agree with. And in the conversations I've had with Tom, and I think we even had him here, is that, with increasing full-time, there are additional responsibilities that we are going to look at. And we are going to say, hey, there needs to be, an increased focus of blighted properties. We've talked about that. We've talked about, and at least and I look at this chair because that's what Julie says. I think it's absolutely silly that the clerk treasurer is responsible for tall grass. That, to me, that's insane. And so, we said, hey, Tom was already, not by being asked to do it, he just did it. And, I know Julie was very grateful for that. It saved her from having to, I guess, go out and take pictures and get a ruler out to check some grass, but, that's
It's obnoxious.
yeah, I think that to me, that only makes sense to, fall within that category. So, for the people that, have watched the other meeting and, they're like, oh, well, it sounds like they're just gonna give him this full-time position, with no added stuff and he gets all these extra benefits. That's not what it is. There is additional responsibilities that's going to continue to benefit our town and the residents.
Well, I think it's an investment. So we went a lot of years with, we didn't mind the P's and the Q's, and people liked that. And we have to mind our P's and Q's, and I think he's up for the job, Kind of a no-brainer to me, but.
But I do think, and I don't know if Brian would agree or not, but I would say that if we come back empty-handed with just a stance, I don't know what type of discussions would be had with that coming back.
Yeah, I think one of the things that was brought up, and I believe it's valid, I mean, you have to listen to all sides when you said there. For one thing, we're very, giving to our employees on their health benefits.
Sign me up.
Yes. And so consequently, when you take somebody to full time, it's not just the hour cost, but the insurance is a massive hit. Okay, I mean, it's a big number. So I think some of the comments is that we want to make sure that we're just not making full time to get insurance, but can we validate that he has enough work to be here full time? Okay, and I believe that's valid. Okay, though I know in the world, most people get full-time jobs and only work half. But I think town councils look, I mean, that is their rebuttal. Okay, that's what they're saying. We've not really asked Tom to designate exactly what he does in his hours. So when they say, what does he do for 8 hours, or what does he do for 32 hours a week? Can you tell him, town council, exactly what he does in 32 hours? I mean, does he work 32 hours? Does he have enough work for 32 hours? I mean, so they're just asking to validate, look at how much time, and if you're going to do this, it's going to cost the town double. It's not going to cost the town 4 hours. It's going to cost them double. So, you have to, and I think it's valid. We have to sit here, and Tom's got to help us. We have to make sure that we have enough work for the hours, or it gets pretty expensive. And Sean works this way too. I mean, I'm on the business side, and you have to make these decisions sometimes. You have to decide, can you really justify it? I mean, I used to have a lady that set up in front of my business, okay? But my business has changed. We're nearly all appointments, everything. And all of a sudden, I'm paying her for 40 hours a week, and the reality is she's more than deaf. She can do all the work I give her in 5 or 10 hours. I mean, this person actually come to me and she said, Brian, this is crazy. She says, I don't have anything to do. No, I just don't feel right taking your money. I don't have anything to do. So, we cut back the hours and, we try to justify, what it needs, but Sean sees this in companies all the time. You see it too, they have to justify their time and their business, and if they can't, it doesn't move forward. So I don't think town council, I'm gonna talk on both sides of it, because I supported this motion to take it at the time, okay? Following town council too, and I have to listen to both sides. They're just saying, hey, we think you need to think about this and you need to show us. What,
And show council and the taxpayer.
because you're ultimately, though we don't get paid, we're ultimately responsible to the taxpayer. You're part of the taxpayer. So.
That's why I think our liability is high.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that's one of the reasons. why I
But
think-
what they're saying, can he take care of our liability in 32 hours? I mean, if he can get it all done in 32 hours, why are you making him full time? That's what they're gonna come back and ask.
Is not enforcement of ordinances in his bailiwick now. I mean, that's a big job.
Well, I think we're trying to define what he has to do and what Keith has to do. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think, they haven't said, no, we're not gonna do it. They're just saying, hey, you guys gotta give us. If they ask us, they said, okay, what does he do in 32 hours? He's here. I had a girl sitting up front for 40 hours, but if somebody said, what did they do? Well, this is what they do, and they can do it in 5 hours.
And
Well, you probably also need to ask, what's he not getting done currently that he needs to, but he doesn't have the time.
Because then.
That's to your point,
Yeah.
if there's a liability because he's not doing some things because he doesn't have the hours to do it, that's what they do.
So that, they're not saying no, they're just saying, we don't feel that you feel, we're just not gonna put somebody on full time because you say put them on full time.
One thing that Steve said and that Tom said, and I've said it for 12 years now, is our code of ordinances is severely out of date. And that is something that does need to be worked on.
So, if we're gonna put him, so this is how you gotta look at it. If his job description says, you're gonna spend 10 hours a week looking at ordinances and how to correct ordinances and get ordinances updated, and that's gotta come to the planning commission. Then all of a sudden you said there's 10 hours blocked. Okay, that's what he knows he's doing. Just to say full-time and, okay, then the citizen says, well, what's he do? What are you gonna ask him? I mean,
Right, and if that,
We know what he
and
does.
if that's gonna be one of the things, addressing ordinances, revising over whatever time period. You compare that to. What, contracting with somebody for $100,000 to go revise our ordinances for us, right?
Yeah.
So how many years does that pay for in the incremental time that would make this on your stuff?
Now, I would also say that you get what you pay for, right? If we wanna make this some rinky-dink side job, then that's what it's gonna be. And how important is it to us
but they want to know.
as
what
a community?
Yeah, and some people in the community aren't gonna care. I'm just gonna be honest with you. Some people in the community would just wish that he would go away. You've already heard that.
Tom, I don't want you to go, but.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. I did, Tom knows. I'm saying that. Tom knows how. But I'm just saying, we have a responsibility, like Shauna said, we took it to town council's come back and say, hey, this is what we're looking for, this is what we need. We need more time for you to justify why it goes full time. And I don't mind throwing this out, I mean, it's public record, just so you know, but I'm saying the hours don't, man, and As soon as he goes full-time, it costs the town $32,000 for benefits.
No, you have to do your due diligence.
Yeah, and that's what they're asking us
I
to do.
understand.
That's what they're asking us to do. And
Well, he did give us a job description.
well, we haven't even got the job descriptions yet. That's tomorrow.
That's tomorrow's meeting.
That's tomorrow's meeting. But still, Becky, you can give me a job description, but how many hours does it take me to do? I always like
Take
it.
quite a few to do this list.
I always like a company to give me a job description and pay me for 40 hours and I figure out how to do it in 15.
There's
I
that.
go for my review and they said, boy, you're doing all this, but you're not. Hey, this is my job description. I'm doing it. I do it 15, 20 hours. You said you'd pay me 40 if I did this, and that's what I'm doing. Just so you know, that's what they're asking. And like I said, I'm a businessman. I see both sides.
Mhm.
And it's not only Tom. You look on public record. No, I don't think. I can't justify to the citizens either why every police officer has a Durango either, or no, a Tahoe, and he knows that. Because I have citizens ask me.
What's wrong with the Charger?
You sat in that thing for 12 hours a day.
You know, so, you know, I think what we took to town council is valid, and I think what town councils come back to us is valid. And I think we need to take, they're just asking us to take a little bit of time and figure this out, you know, and they haven't said no. They just said, hey, guys, you just they don't want us to come to them and say, we want you to go full-time because we think so.
And I do think it's a reasonable request. And I don't want this to come off of being a smart aleck either. But this isn't the only thing you did in a month. These are 10 things that you brought to the, the notable things.
Yeah, and part of that discussion at town council meeting, there was a counting of tasks by how many permits, how many inspections, how many stop works. And tasks are the end result of work.
A lot of legwork, yeah, a lot of time.
That's not how you tally how much work went into the task. And a good example I could say would be, say for instance, you're a detective with the police department. And you have a caseload, you have reports come in, and to ask a detective in a year, how many arrests have your work process allowed prosecutors to, or how many arrests have you made that because of the legwork you've done, the prosecutor's been able to submit charges and get a conviction? So, okay, 30, 40, maybe you got 40 arrests that resulted in convictions. How many hours did it take to put together the investigation, all of the clue, whatever it takes to investigate stuff?
See, they look at it wrong. They look at it backwards, and I agree with him. And it's like, so I would take the same scenario. Well, how long does it take you to arrest somebody? An hour?
Yeah, exactly.
You did 36 this year. Took you 36 hours a year, but we paid you for 1,900.
2,080 for 40 hours a year.
2,080, but you only made 36 arrests. That takes an hour, so you only work 36 hours. So they kind of,
It's apples and oranges.
Yes.
yeah.
For what it's worth, I mean, not that that we would be paying him to sit around and wait for somebody to call, but. Part of it is the convenience of availability, if somebody needs something inspected. Or whatever the case may be. Well, if he's not available, then you're waiting until next week,
Yeah.
That was a real problem before.
And I think it's still a problem now. I think that's even been complained about before. And Chris may know better than Tom, but I mean, it's been a complaint in the office is that, old Tom isn't working. So, you're gonna have to wait until he's back. Now, you may not be back until this day or may not be back until this day.
You know, so it's, it really wasn't a no, it's just, they're coming back and say, hey, we want you guys to think this thing back through a little bit more, and we want you to be more specific, an idea like permits. So if he goes 5 days a week, should everybody know in the community that he's gonna be here at time, I'm just taking that. He's gonna be here 8 to 10 for permits and 3 to 4 in the afternoon. So if you get here early, you wanna get your permits at the started, he's gonna be here 8 to 10 and get your permit. If you wanna come later to get your permit for the next day, he's gonna be in. So then you can say, okay, there is. Now, he might sit here for 2 hours and not get a permit, but if we're saying, and we're gonna tell the public he's gonna be here. There's 3 hours a day, 15 hours a week, that we're telling the community he's going to be available to get permits. And then he's got to inspect between that hour and the hour he's got to be back, and he's got to do his leg work, and he's got to do his homework, and. But that's what they're saying, you know, give us what we're looking, what's a week gonna look like? What are we gonna ask him to do in that week? And so that it's, you know, because, and town council, believe it or not, we have citizens come to us and say, hey, I can't believe you guys spent that, or you guys did that. And, you know, we've had to answer on the water system, you know, good grief. I said, yeah, I know it's inconvenient, but I said, you know, we replaced 100-year-old water lines, and it's been a little inconvenient, but how about if you didn't have water for 6 months? How would that be?
So what do we need to do?
Well, we're gonna have to, as a committee, Jason, you're gonna have to assign us a time that says, you know, like, he's gonna bring these ordinances in, but you gotta assign us a time and say, you know, we need to think about what is his week what are we gonna require him to do in this week? Now, I know not every week's the same.
Right.
But what's the week look like? You know,
And we'll start next time?
Well, and I think we agreed June or July's meeting that we would bring back a new proposal.
so that's kind of our time. And it has nothing to do with how many permits and how much money that is bringing. There's some people on town council, they say the permits have nothing to do with to pay for a salary. It's just a compliance thing. So people be compliant. So they're not saying that he's got to do more permits, and the permits has got to be a lot more money to justify his job. That has never been discussed.
Even though the permit fees need to increase.
Correct.
Some of them I disagree with you on town council.
If you look around the
Yeah,
area, I mean,
See, there's another job that he can be assigned that we think this should be done, and then it goes to town council, and that's things that he's doing. But you don't present it in a way, we're doing this so we can help pay for his salary, because town council don't look at that. They're not looking at that. They're not even expecting that. You know, they can't write enough tickets to pay for their salary. I mean,
No, you get $3 out of each ticket,
I mean,
$160 ticket.
we don't have some police officers, you know, you gotta write enough tickets to pay, I mean, we don't expect that. Matter of fact, we would like people to be kind of courteous, but, you know, we let a lot of people, we just give them warnings, and we don't get after our police officers because they get warnings. You know, but, so, you know, we gotta help Tom out, we gotta look at it. Maybe when, you know, I'm saying in front of Tom, maybe when we get all said and done, maybe we think 32 hours is enough.
can I throw a comment out there on that? I know I watched the meeting, a couple of times. Full-time is anything over 30 hours legally. I looked at a job posting on Wayne County's website. They have a part-time clerk in the court system. The job advertises as full-time, 35.5 hours a week. So full-time is 30 or more.
You sure it's not
And-
32?
and I-
No, it cuts off at 29. That's why
29 is why
No, we
they
don't.
dropped to 29.
Hey, that's 29 hours.
30, you have to furnish insurance.
Right, that's right.
And I know the discussion was, well, it's not fair for everyone else that comes to work and works a 40-hour week. For someone to work 32 hours a week and get the same health care coverage. It's not fair to them. Well, my thought on that is it's really none of their business. And there's a lot of things that don't have to equate to be justified.
From town council, but I will tell you, if I'm gonna tell you you're gonna justify 40 hours to get it, guess what? You're gonna work 40 hours.
I understand that, but
Because I don't wanna explain to the other employees and I don't wanna explain to the citizens.
Well, I don't know how town's policies are written, but I know like at our work, you can work a 32-hour work week, be considered full-time, be eligible for insurance, but you're only gonna get 80% of the contribution towards, as opposed to a full-time.
80% of the company,
32 versus 40 hours, so you're gonna get,
your check's gonna be small.
Now, you're gonna have to pay for more.
you're gonna pay more for your insurance, you're gonna get less contribution from the company towards premiums.
And we might,
And you cover the difference.
and that might be something we could consider too.
And in regards to that insurance, and this is kind of the personal part of this, I have Medicare. The town, according to you the other day, said you have 17 full-time employees. That means my Medicare is my primary insurer, even though I have healthcare coverage here.
It'd just be your supplemental.
It would be what isn't covered on my primary, because the coverage is probably better on your policy. So if they don't cover something, your policy would probably pick it up, but it's secondary.
Right.
Will that change the premium?
No.
It should. It limits your exposure.
But if you're creating it, aren't you creating a position? So when you aren't doing this any longer, the next person would step into that.
I don't understand how that's relative to the point that I'm making.
Oh, well, if we're gonna professionalize the position, then it becomes a permanent position.
So you have to budget it for when you're gone. So we can't budget it for your personal circumstances. You have to budget it. And I think that's what you're trying to say is you have to budget it for, like, let's say I was single, had no kids, my insurance is gonna be much cheaper than what my insurance would be now with a, family of 5. But I, as a councilman, I can't budget for the single guy. I need to budget for the most expensive, not to the single person. I have to know, well, if I, the single person, leave and the next person that follows is the family guy, I need to make sure that our budget matches that number.
But if it
Not
comes
the
in
low.
under budget, it comes in under budget.
Right, correct. If it comes in our budget, great. But you have to budget for the high end, not the low end, which I think that's what you were trying to say. Which,
I can only work up to 36 hours a week, but I have no benefits other than vacation and sick time. Nobody at the library has insurance. Nobody has any benefits.
And I know the insurance thing has been thrown out there continually as the main reason. But it would include, holiday pay, personal day off, vacation time, sick day.
which you don't get
I get none of that.
now.
Right, and I knew that. when-
And if you take a day off, it's just
Yeah.
without, it's just
I
no
need to
pay.
figure out where to catch those hours. And if it's Thursday, Thanksgiving and the day after, I have to figure out how to get my hours in on 3 days, which may cause me to come in on a Sunday. If I know that's coming up in the next week, I mean, our week schedule is Saturday to Friday, so.
Well, it's, welcome to my world.
I understand. I really do appreciate you, Brian, and I really appreciate you. And I appreciate Shirley sitting here and appreciate, Chris on town council, because all of you went to bat for me. The only 2 that didn't go to bat for me was the president and the one sitting where you're sitting. The president was silent.
Why am I not surprised?
And I looked at that and in my mind, I'm thinking, this should be an executive session without being broadcast.
You're probably right.
Because it crossed the line into employee performance, employee-employer relationships.
Well, when the
It
meeting,
crossed the line.
when the meeting was called, that was never supposed to be a.
Well, that's where the president of the council says, we're stopping the discussion right here. Instead of beating that horse for an hour and 35 minutes. Another quick question, the lawsuit. I'm named on that lawsuit, so are you, so is council president. As a part-time employee, do I get the benefit of the town's attorney?
Yes. Because you're being sued as part of the town.
Okay. What's the latest? I've done a little research.
I'd say that should be,
Yeah,
I'd say for the executive session
Yeah.
that you could be included on, or just, I'd say probably talk about it.
I've done a little research on the steps being.
Well,
legal.
Tom, I was told by our attorney to not discuss
Okay,
it.
or hopefully there's somebody that knows how to work through the weeds and find out what's what.
So-
Levels and all that kind of stuff.
So I think the planning commission, what my understanding is from council is by July's meeting. We need to work through his
His hours, his duties, his job description.
job description, thank you.
Well, you probably ought to know before July, because start the budget in May.
Right. So at some point, Tom, I will get with you personally and we'll talk about those things. Kind of like he mentioned, the things that you would really like to get to that you don't really get to as much as you would. Because I think that's important to know about, well,
I agree.
you could really do an even better job if you had more time to do it, kind of thing.
And I think John has a valid point too, you know, we need to look at what. Let's face it, the town works on a lot of volunteer people, and we're already, an hour.
Don't look at that clock.
You know, we're, you know, our volunteer time, but, you know, maybe Sean's right. Town planning commission says, listen, in the time that we donate to the town, you know, our hours or 2 hours or whatever a month, we just can't get all this done. So we need Tom to do the background work, bring it all to us so we can evaluate and determine whether we're gonna move it on up to town council. So that we can get everything up to date, because Steve was pretty blunt. I mean, we got some stuff that's 50 years old. You know,
Well, it's not only a time thing. We in this room. I think I'll speak for all of us, but we don't have the full expertise to completely revamp every single ordinance that we have.
Yeah.
We can look at them and we can revise individual ones as issues come up and we need to focus on a single one. But look at the whole thing. I don't feel I have the tools to be able to do that. So if we want to do that as a town, you know, I would recommend we go hire a consulting firm to come in and do that. And we're going to pay $150,000 to do that. So the alternative is if we can collaborate using Tom's expertise and possibly some others to augment that. You know, that's where I'm coming from.
And I'm gonna agree with you, because I sat on plan commission when this was done. I don't think you did, Becky, but I did, but. I mean, when you looked at our ordinances, I mean, we had blacksmith, telephone.
Yeah, I mean, I sat on that too, and even that was a revision. We didn't rewrite there.
And you know why we didn't pay anything for it? Because Steve come in.
Right.
Every meeting, and we took 1 hour of our meeting, every meeting, and we took a section of that, and Steve kind of guided us through what we could do and how we could change it. But if Steve hadn't come in through that process, it's like Sean said, we probably spent $40,000-$50,000 hiring a consultant to do that. We was just fortunate enough, we had somebody in the community that was willing to volunteer. Heavens, he even did all the printing on the county for us, but yeah, so.
And I mean, this is obviously speculation, but I would say that part of that is the result of having part-time position and allowing people to cut corners when they shouldn't have, so nobody knows what rules apply. And then, you know, how many times have you encountered a situation and brought it to us like, yeah, well, this is what the code says. But it shouldn't be like that, you know, like that's how a lot of this has come about. Like I said, speculation, but that could be partially due to it not being a full-time position in the past.
I'll tell you one funny story, so I'm getting my mini split place right now, he's pretty. Local, you know, I try to do everything local. And he asked me, he said, Brian, he said, is this gonna be inspected by Tom? And I said, yeah, he says, well, I really wanna make sure that I get it right. And I said, you know what, I really want you to make sure you get it right. I'm paying you, I want it. I mean, it
That's
blows-
given, right?
But
It's gotta be
it
done.
blows my mind, yeah, I want it right, period.
Yeah.
I mean, if it, I told him, I said, you know, if you gotta bill me $100 more to get it right,
And by all means.
I mean, I'm paying you X amount, what's another $100 on it to get it right? I mean, that's important to me.
Well, we got a lot to think about, but I move to adjourn.
So moved.
You got, you'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I so moved.
All those in favor? Aye.
Hey.